Welcome to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. Now here's your host, Tim McMahon.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him. Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. Stretch out with your feelings.
Hey, it's Tim. Now, Top 5 Week continues here on Less Than 12 Parsecs. Each day for 5 days, I'm presenting you with a new Top 5 list. You know what? Today it dawned on me. There are 5 basic senses, right? So how could I use this and turn it into a Top 5 list? Well, how about a little something like this? Here are the top 5 things I would like to experience with my 5 senses if I were in the Star Wars universe.
Number 1.
Touch. I want to touch and hold a lightsaber in my hand. Does it vibrate? Does it hum? Is it hot? Is it heavy or light? Can you sense where the tip is the same way you can while holding a solid blade? Now, we all know that anyone can turn on a lightsaber and use it, as we saw Han Solo do in Empire Strikes Back. But in my brain, I've always imagined that only a Jedi can properly wield this blade. I think we can all agree on that. But why? Well, I've always had this idea that once a lightsaber blade starts to move, it kind of wants to keep moving in that direction. You know, like one of those gyroscope toys that spin, and when you hold it in your hand, it feels all wonky when you move it around, like it's fighting you and fighting gravity. I kind of imagine a lightsaber blade is that way, and only a Jedi has the ability to wrangle the blade. The blade is kind of like a steed that a cowboy needs to break. Does that make any sense? It probably doesn't, but in my head, that's the way I've always imagined it.
Number 2.
Smell. Now, there are a lot of things in the Star Wars galaxy that honestly don't smell so great. Things that probably absolutely reek. Han Solo taught us that Tauntauns stink worse on the inside than the outside, and he quipped, with much snark, to Princess Leia about how wonderful the Death Star trash compactor smelled. Oh, and don't get me going on how bad I believe Jabba's palace must reek. But there's also some things in that galaxy far, far away that honestly, I'm very curious to learn how they smell. For example, the wind on Tatooine versus the wind on Jakku. I'm sure they're similar, but there must be some differences. And what's the spicy scent of a burning death stick smell like? And how about the iridescent jungles of the planet Felucia? I bet you can smell the moist, dank life all around you. But the one scent I've wondered about the most is, what do Wookiees smell like? Now, in my imagination, it's actually a warm, inviting smell. I mean, everyone wants to hug Chewbacca after all, so he can't stink. Now, I don't think a Wookiee would be too musky. Instead, there'd be like a rich mix of cinnamon and dried driftwood like you find on the beach. And maybe an ever so slight hint of dark organic soil. Or how about something surprising like a bit of mint or some other sweet herb? And you know, when a Wookiee gets wet, for some reason, I don't think they would stink like a dog. Instead, I bet it just intensifies their aroma, nothing more. Provided it's clean water here that we're talking about. I'm not talking about a muddy Mibian beast type situation like we saw in Solo. That's not what I'm saying.
Number 3.
Taste. Now, there are many culinary delights to be had in the Star Wars galaxy. From roasted nerf to fresh Jogan fruit to that Insta-bread that Rey snarfs down in Episode 7. But of all these yummy delights, the one thing I would like to try the most is, can you guess? All right, you guessed it, blue milk. Yeah, I know it's a Star Wars cliche at this point, but come on, I'm really curious. I love dairy products, so to try one from a galaxy far, far away is just a no-brainer for me. Is it rich with cream or thinner like a skim milk? Does whatever makes it turn blue also give it a unique flavor? And yes, I know what you're thinking. I would even give green milk a try. The green milk of the sea cows, the Thala sirens that we saw Luke Skywalker milking in Episode 8. Maybe not fresh from the teat like Luke enjoys. I would prefer to have it pasteurized and chilled, but that's just me.
Number 4.
Sight. After all the films, TV shows, video games, comic books, and officially sanctioned artwork, we have seen a lot of the Star Wars galaxy. But there is so much more to see. And what would I like to see? Well, I'm always curious about what is right around the corner from what we saw on screen. Like, what is behind the camera? You know, whenever I visit someplace touristy, someplace that I've seen like a million times in photographs, like say the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., or the Eiffel Tower in Paris, I always like to explore the area around the famous landmark, the stuff you never see on the postcards. And so my practice would be the same if I were traveling around the worlds of Star Wars. What's around the corner from the Mos Eisley Cantina? What business is right next door to Dexter Jetster's Diner? I bet it's a mortuary, just like on Bob's Burgers. What does Supreme Leader Snoke's boudoir look like? Ever since DJ mentioned it in The Last Jedi, I've been curious.
Number 5.
Hearing. One of the best things about the Star Wars films is the awesome oral landscape created by the artist at Skywalker Sound. But if you think about it, 50% of what you hear in the movies, you would not hear if you were actually there. There would be no John Williams score following you around. There would be no screech of the TIE fighters blasting by if you were in the middle of a dogfight. There would be no thrum of the subwoofer when Vader uses the Force to choke you out. So I guess there isn't really anything in the Star Wars universe that I want to hear, but I would be curious to hear what it's like for real. And if I could narrow that down to something specific, I guess it would be space travel and space combat. Remember, sound doesn't travel in a vacuum, so I imagine dogfights consist of just the vibrations of your own ship's engines, the chirps of the control panels, and the sound of your own heart pounding as you try to keep your sense of panic at bay. Alright, real quick, a bonus sense, a sixth sense if you will. I see dead people. I wonder what it would feel like to have the Force flowing through you. I kind of half imagine it would be that feeling you get when your bladder is really, really full and you've held it for so long that you're in pain, and then when you finally are able to relieve yourself, that sense of awe, peace, and relief that just radiates through your entire body. I bet it's something a little bit like that. Okay, there you go. Those are the 6 things I would like to experience with my 6 senses if I was in the Star Wars universe. What would you like to experience in the Star Wars universe with your 5 senses? I want to know. Email me at 12parsecs.podcast@gmail.com or connect with me on any of my social media accounts. All the links can be found on my website, 12parsecs.podcast.com. Thanks for listening. Utini!
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
You've been listening to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. For links and show notes, visit our website, 12parsecsPodcast.com. Follow Less Than 12 Parsecs on Twitter at 12parpod, on Instagram at 12parsecsPodcast, on Tumblr at 12parsecsPodcast, and find us on Facebook as well. And please let us know what you think. Email us at 12parsecsPodcast@gmail.com. All Star Wars sounds, music, images, logos, designs, characters, and elements are registered trademarks and copyright of Disney, Lucasfilm Limited, and their subsidiaries and respected rights holders, and used by Less Than 12 Parsecs Podcast under Fair Use Doctrine. All original content is copyright Tim McMahon and Less Than 12 Parsecs Podcast, released under the No Derivative Works Creative Commons license.